Welcome back, everyone. It's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. I'm really excited to share with you today a organization that came across my radar recently that unfortunately is really necessary in our industry when it comes to school groups and camps and the way in which these groups of children are visiting our aquatic facilities and potentially are a gap with our ratios and our proper procedures for managing groups of kids. So I'm really excited today to chat with Kori Delapeña from Live Like Katie. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Katie, for having me.
So Kori, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what led you to starting this organization?
Yeah, so we live in Texas, and in 2019, my 6-year-old daughter, Cati, and my older daughter, Kairi, which she was about to turn 9, we we're gonna put them in a summer camp. You know, as most people, both parents work, and we needed a few weeks of care, and so we did our due diligence to look up a lot of the camps, and we went to this one specifically here in Cedar Park, Texas, High Hopes summer camp, and we made sure we physically took the girls to make sure that they saw the girls. We did basically checked every single box. Our big concern was that our youngest daughter, Cati, did not know how to swim yet. And so we made sure that they knew she could not swim. And we dropped her off the first day of camp. Both of the girls did great. The second day was swim day. That's the day that they would take them to the pool. Again, even though I had already done it, put it on, the application that she could not swim, I had already told the program director. I still went again and spoke to the program director and said, hey, remember she can't swim. Put a life jacket on before she gets in the pool. Don't worry. I even asked, at that time, I didn't know what a water safety plan was, but I asked, what's the plan like to keep them safe? And he said, Kori, don't worry. We're going to have my counselors are going to be at the shallow end, all holding their hands out like this, making sure that the little ones don't go to the deep end. She'll be fine. And unfortunately, that afternoon, they called us and let us know that she had drowned, and we rushed over to the hospital, and got the unfortunately did not make it, but we did have a few hours with her. And so after her death, so in Texas, when a child dies under the care of somebody else, there's an agency that's CPS, that's what they call it, that does the investigation. And that's how we found out a lot of the details. So all together, we learned, we asked, the big question was like, hey, we did everything in our power as parents to make sure that Cati would have been safe. What did we do wrong? Like, where did we, what happened? And so when the report came out, we saw it was just a lot of things that had been into place. Not only did the camp director have a history of negligence, but the staff that camp had too many kids for the staff. There's so many things, so many things wrong. Background checks were not done, a lot of things. And then I told myself, well, isn't there any type of water safety training? Like, you provide training for staff in reference to CPR, baby shaken syndrome. In fact, even if you take a bus of children to a field trip, you require the staff to take transportation training. And then, of course, once you suffer a loss due to drowning, you find out that in the US, drowning is the #1 killer of children under 5 and the second for children under 15. So my question to the state was, if know that drowning is a huge issue, why isn't it that you require your staff to take this type of training? And they didn't have an answer. And that's how we were led to think of outside the box. And we were very lucky that our CPS investigator, Angel, was the one that said, hey, Kori, he goes, do you know the program MAD, which is Mothers Against Drunk Driving? And I said, oh yeah. He goes, that began by a mother. And he said she went to legislation and, decided to make change. And that's ultimately what led us to figure out how to go through legislation.
It's unfortunately such a common story that it takes something like this for people to sit up and take notice within our industry. With that investigation, did you find out anything about the pool, like the depth that your daughter was in, or any particular aspects about the pool design that when they selected that location? Like, was the summer camp renting pool space in their building or somewhere close by?
So the pool was owned by the city of Cedar Park. And the information that I have, it doesn't, there was no aquatics person hired to do the investigation or things like that. So this is basic information that I have from the documents and pictures that were taken. This case was a very interesting one because the county where the incident happened, which was Williamson County, they actually indicted the program director, and we had to go through a trial. So a lot of this information that we found out was also in addition to through the trial. The program director was convicted as a felon. He did not serve any jail time, but John and I were just happy that he was not going to be able to work with other children in anywhere in the States, which our priority was that, because somebody who has elementary degree, education background, and went through so many faults like that should not be around children. We just thought that would be a harm. And so, and of course, we followed what the county led us to. And then the city part, the pool there's a lot of errors done there as well. And the reason we know this is there was, before Cati drowned, there was a person that was driving into the neighborhood. She happened to be an attorney and also experienced in aquatics. So she saw that there was a lot of children at the pool. It's chaos. She decided to pull into the pool, get off, started asking who was in charge. The program director came and she said, what you have here is wrong. Something's going to happen. He ignored her and Cati drowned. And then while Cati was drowning, she began taking pictures of the situation. And what we know from what we understand is while they were resuscitating my daughter on the ground, the pool staff was more worried about moving the lifeguard stands to where they should have belonged. And there was not enough lifeguards on staff. In fact, that pool manager should have never let in the camp, being that they were over the amount, and from what we know, they didn't have permission to be there as well. So there's a lot of factors in it. There's photos of, their life jackets that they had available were in a big paint bucket, just at the corner of the entrance. They were thrown on the floor, and you're looking at, ratty life jackets. There was no system into place from what it looks like. So there was a lot of things done wrong, but we knew that in the state of Texas, the way that, as far as what we understand right now, I'm not an attorney, but from what I've been told is municipalities are exempt from having any kind of responsibility in any of this. And so we knew that in order for us to make change, we had to go towards making sure that the staff who brought in the children and who's, we as parents gave them release to take care of them were prepared. And so that's how we ended up working towards a law that would specifically affect summer camps and childcare organizations or any school that is licensed here in Texas through what we call the HHSC, which is Health and Human Services.
This is so valuable, and I want to dive into the law in just a second, but I wanted to comment on, I think that unfortunately what you as a parent have experienced is, a risk that so many parents out there aren't even aware is a risk of their child, whether they go to a summer camp, whether they go to a daycare, whether they go to a religious group activity. Speaking as somebody who started at a university, I started my career as a lifeguard. In the summer, the university hosted these massive summer camps, multi-sport, different ages. It was a great moneymaker. And I think back to those public swims for the camp that we would have each day from, 2 to 3 o'clock with hundreds of kids in the pool. Camp counselors were sitting on the side, this was before phones, but hanging out and chatting, getting a break. And, hindsight being what it is, we're so lucky nothing happened because we had all ages. They were not well marked, whether the kids were under that camp. I think the youngest age was 6, but they were not wristbanded under the age of 8. There was not clear guidance given to us who had to be in a life jacket, who should be in a life jacket. The ratios were completely absent. And so I want to talk a little bit about the law first and then circle back to ratios if we can. But tell us about the law. What are the key pieces that these organizations that are now licensed have to follow, or plans they have to develop?
Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that we created a law that would be able to pass in Texas. In Texas, any law that you pass, people say, oh, it's very difficult to pass a law. Well, of course, because it affects 30 million Texans. Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that we kept something really simple, not complicated, fill in that hole that was missing. And of course, nothing is simple in politics, but the law that we were able to pass took us 2 sessions, which here in Texas, the legislature meets every 2 years. So we were very fortunate that it passed within those 2 sessions. And the law is so simple, Katie. It basically says that if you are an organization that's licensed through Health and Human Services here in Texas, and your intention is to take children to the pool, and it does not say river or lake because the Health and Human Services organization does not allow organizations to take kids to anything else but pools. Okay, so it's specifically for pools. Then you must ask the parent or guardian whether the child can or cannot swim. And they're creating, it's a PDF form that they're giving out to camps where it basically will state the competency of the child's swimming abilities. If the child cannot swim, then you are required by law to put a U.S. Coast Guard certified life jacket on them before entering the gates of the pool. So it's super simple. Now the life jacket that that should be put on there is type 1, type 2, which it's these little jackets right here. These basic ones. It excludes the puddle jumpers, so that is not included. What we are working right now in is when a law comes into effect in Texas of September 1st of last year is when it came into effect, but then it gets handed over to the agency, which is Health and Human Services. And then they have to, make sure that they find out like, what is the administrative penalties? What other information can we add? And we are working with the state to try to get them to do some type of water safety training at it. And that's in the works right now.
I think that there's so many key points I love about what you've described. So they have to have the equipment on at the perimeter of the access to the pool. It's not just at the pool edge. And I love that you specified the nature of the equipment, because that, as you know, is such a thorny one. People say, well, why can't I use the puddle jumper from Walmart? Or I saw this thing at Costco and the kids really like that it's got, Elsa on it. It's really so important, as you've pointed out, that it's Coast Guard approved. It's going to keep their face out. It's going to keep their chest up. And it really is going to be weight-based, because I think back to when I was a municipal pool manager and we would have school-based lessons for a specific grade. If we had a whole bunch of kids who were in grade 3 come in, they would be different sizes, but they would often fill just one under 40 to 80 pounds or whatever kind of middle size, and we would run out of life jackets. And I think a lot of organizations may not be that diligent to realize, hey, we need a specific size for a specific weight of child. They just look at it like a coat or a jacket. If it zips, it fits, which is not the case at all for that.
Yeah, and the law says that it needs to be properly fitted. There's specifications on that. And I always tell, we do get a question of why not puddle jumpers. And my easiest explanation to them is just what you said. It says if a child doesn't have that strength in their torso or, and right now I know we work a lot with aquatic staff, so we get a lot of feedback and a lot of stories. There's a lot of behavior issues, and also a lot of children that might be on the spectrum that you don't know that once they might be good swimmers, but the minute that another kid splashes their face, they panic, right? Or so anyway, I always tell them the puddle jumper will throw the child forward to their face. The U.S. Coast Guard certified life jacket, which type 1 or type 2, will throw them on their back, even if they panic, which will give enough time for an adult to go out there and, pull them out and calm them down, or the lifeguard, whoever's there.
Well, and I love what you said about having some sort of water safety training here in Alberta. One of our big organizations called the Life Saving Society, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, they had a big push around, there was some daycare deaths, not drowning, but just daycare injuries in terms of field trips, and really advocating that early child care providers, they have great training, but it may not be for a water setting. It may not be for a park setting. It may not be for outside of the classroom or the childcare facility. And so the Life Saving Society came up with what's called a caregiver supervision booklet. I'll send it to you. It's a really great, yeah. So it's geared towards dry people who understand the kids, but they don't understand the pool hazards. And so it's a 3-hour self-study course with some, downloadable documents. And it's not perfect, but it really gave those childcare providers, or even like your grandparents who are assisting the group, or teachers who don't have a pool background, it gave them the language to understand what the lifeguard means when we say, our ratio is this, you need to stay within arm's reach, or because sometimes it just comes across as the lifeguard is the fun police, or we don't have the time when there's 30 kids running around to really explain why our rules are our rules, even though they are grounded in the science, like you said, of kids being higher risk below a certain age. Or even speaking myself as a swim instructor for many, many years, that demographic of kids who are 5, 6, 7, where they really want to participate with their friends, but there's a wide discrepancy in their swimming ability based on what opportunities they've had so far, right? Or even height. You could have a child who barely can get their chin out of the shallow end, and another kid whose, chin is completely out and is not at risk.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that you mentioned about, we created this law not only to educate the summer camp staff, but also at the same time, we saw the effects of what Cati's death did also as far as trauma to the staff that was present at the pool. And what we heard of the effects. And so to us, it was also very, very important to make sure that, when we created this law, it wasn't just John, my husband, John, and I saying, hey, let's create this law. No, we actually got stakeholders, the National Drowning Prevention Alliance, a lot of coalitions. And one of the things that happened through this is they also interviewed lifeguards, and we asked, what is your biggest fear, on your job? And a lot of them would say, when we are working the pool, we already have 50 kids, public pool kids, and then here comes this summer camp bus with 100 kids, and they just let them roam in like a herd, and we are responsible to figure out who can swim and who cannot. And constantly stories through stories just of people who were or are counselors, of how stressed they were, just to think that tomorrow was pool day and they had to deal with this. And so we took into consideration all of this feedback, and kind of thought, that's how the law was incorporated, at the same time, to make sure that the aquatic staff that was on the ground would also have some type of protection that would help them. And right now what we do is we're speaking to a lot of the municipalities and aquatic personnel, because especially since we found out that that Texas, you know, if something happens like this in Texas exempts these or these municipalities, we basically tell them at the end of the day, your bosses are the ones that set the rules. And from feedback of the aquatic personnel, a lot of times they say, Kori, our bosses know nothing about water. And sometimes, you know, we've heard so many stories. So what we tell them is, we want to make sure that, you know, at the end of the day, if you see a pool patron, if you see your staff, something that's going to put them at risk, don't do it. Do not do it. And there's no job in the world that's worth risking you having a drowning under your watch. And at the end of the day, the only people that are affected are not the higher ups in the city or the municipalities or organizations. It's the staff. And so we're opening up their eyes to make sure that it's okay to speak up if something's not wrong. And this came about it, Katie, from those conversations we started having of different stories of people having non-fatal drownings happen under their watch because they followed rules that they knew they were wrong, but they still did them because they were afraid of losing their job.
And I think it's unfortunate but completely necessary that you had to take a top-down approach and make it legislation and make it mandatory, because speaking just from my own experience working for municipalities, summer camps bring in a lot of money. They're, quote, really easy to program, especially if it's multi-sport. And those camp people don't necessarily understand. They think, well, let's put the pool on the program. Looks really cool. The kids will get to cool off in the middle of the day. And the lifeguards are saying, no, 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 you can't have your ratio of 1 to 8, which sounds great in a soccer field park. It doesn't work in the pool. And you don't have the staff to go down to 1 counselor to 3 campers, right? So you're relying on the lifeguards to make up that difference. And yet you want to bring in 2 or 3 kids or 2 or 3 age groups at the same time. And you're ending up with 90 kids in the pool, right? And it's not realistic to think the lifeguards can account for all of that. It's often kids of very comparable ages, often really little kids, whether it's 6, 7, 8, or mixed ages. And it's really unfortunate, but I think accurate, like you said, people at the top of management, whether it's directors or recreation facility managers, they don't think about these things until something goes wrong. And lifeguards that I've worked with or trained have said, you know, until they're blue in the face, we can't do this. But at the end of the day, unless they walk away from the job or really put their foot down, it continues to happen, right? And it's February now. We're heading into that summer season where people are putting out their programs, starting to offer, you know, what are we going to do? And I guess to ask you, when you were looking at the camps, did it mention that the pool was a field trip that was included? Or how was that? Because was that appealing to you or not appealing to you because of?
So in Texas, our weather is we're always hot. So it's like, I want to say it's 350 days out of the whole year, it's hot. And so, which is, the pool is enticing, especially since I had an older daughter that already knew how to swim. So that was, that I knew, which is why I was so diligent over it and over, and making sure that, you know, even down to the day that I dropped her off, like reassuring me. And I knew that it was, I mean, I wasn't the only parent that took my kid to a summer camp that had a pool, but I knew that I was going to be diligent in making sure that she was going to be safe. But unfortunately she wasn't. And, you know, when we talked to the summer camps, because our organization Live Like Cati, we also provide webinars in conjunction with Colin, so where we bring in, you know, water safety training specifically set for summer camps. So we go over, you know, talking about emergency action plans, you know, things like that, just down to the detail. But we tell the summer camp staff, the lifeguards are not there to watch your children. That is your job. The lifeguard's job is to prevent and rescue, And we really open up their eyes. You know, we share our story. We open up their eyes about, you know, showing them stories of drownings that have happened. And the majority of them, when we have these trainings, they basically go, we didn't know this is such a big issue. And then a lot of them start sharing their own stories, saying, we actually cut out summer camps because we would go to the pool and try to, and save other camps kids. They said because the counselors were sitting out the bleachers. And so we just got so fed up of doing the job of other counselors, we just stopped going to the pools. We hear all kinds of stories, but yeah, but the idea, I always try to push it back to tell them lifeguards are there to prevent and resuscitate, not to be babysitting the children. That is your responsibility.
I think for context, for some people who haven't necessarily done work in this area, speaking from my own experience, when I was a pool manager, we tried to work with the local summer camps and say, could you just give us a courtesy call or an email or let us know what days you want to bring the kids? Like, we want to welcome them at the pool, but we're going to need to have more staff, or we need to reduce the public admissions. We want to work with you so that you can come to the pool. But then other groups would say, well, no, we don't want to tell you, or they were not keen to follow the ratio. So we would have kids who would clearly come from one organization, but they would arrive separately, like separate vehicles or separate, this daycare provider brings in 4 kids now and then 5 minutes from now. So they're trying to keep them within our our parent ratio, but hiding that they're there with a group when they're obviously there with a group. And we would see the same thing too with birthday parties, unfortunately. We would try and notify our community members, you're welcome to have a birthday party at our pool, but we'd really appreciate a courtesy so we know how many birthday parties are coming, because it's the same thing. There's a very famous video, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but a series of unfortunate events. And it is regarding a birthday party. For those who haven't seen it, I'll link it down below, but it's regarding a birthday party with similar circumstances where a parent of one of the children attending the birthday party stated to the birthday parents, my child does not know how to swim. And the birthday parents assured her that they would stay within arm's reach of the child. And the child was submerged for over 7 minutes and ended up having gross morbidity, so long-term life complications. And so birthday parties, we would be called the fun police, though, as the pool management. Well, why do you have to police who comes for a birthday party? It's a public swim. But as you know, some days are busy, some days are quiet, and it's really hard to predict and really hard to manage if you have 40 little kids show up and the parents or caregivers are not integrated in that supervision plan.
I think the best defense that you, as an aquatic professional, that you could have is really own your pool and stand firm on not doing something that higher ups are telling you that it's going to put your staff in a bad situation. And I can tell you that staff is very stressed out. I mean, it's a big stressful job, which my question, a lot of times is, Kori, why is it so hard to find lifeguards? Well, hello, look at the stress you're giving them. You're having a 250 patron pool being watched by how many lifeguards? 2, 3? I mean, really, in Texas, the city can put 1 lifeguard if they want, or 2. So imagine those humans watching that many kids, and a lot of parents are on their phone, not watching their own children. And then you have these summer camps that are doing that. But the great thing about it, I can tell you, Katie, that we are seeing through sharing our story, through doing the trainings. Right now, we're really going into talking about our experience and trying to figure out how we can help the aquatic professionals and these individuals that are in the municipalities. Is that we're getting so much feedback. Some of them have said, Kori, because of your law, we're able to stand up to our boss and say, I had one lady tell me that they had a counselor come in with 25 kids. And she said, and Cati's law had just passed. And she said, no, you're not going to come in. He had no clue who can swim, nothing. So he was upset. The counselor called her boss, and her boss was, of course, goes down, right, and says, what's going on? And she said, because of the law, I was able to stand firm and said, do you want to break the law? Because I'm not. And so that helped her. Now, and it's unfortunate that this has to happen, but we're getting a lot of good feedback from it, that the laws like this not only protect the child, but also help help the staff of the pool, because they can monitor and put a limit on, like, hey, who can swim and who cannot? You should already know. And they'll say, these 10 babies can't. Okay, did you bring a jacket, or do we have to provide it? And that makes the jobs of the staff much easier. And we actually proved this with data. After the first session, it didn't pass the first session. The city of Plano municipality heard about the law. They decided, we don't care if it's not a law, we're going to implement it into our city code. They ran with it. Then they reported back to us and said, because of Cati's law, not only did we see the number of active drownings drastically reduce, but we also know that our staff is less strained because of the law. And that was like gold to us, because we were able to take that over to the Capitol and say, hey, here's proof. A municipality already took into place, it works. And so we're seeing that happen. And so a lot of good things are happening, and more awareness is happening. And hopefully one day it can reach up to the heads, the leaders, and understand that it's important to not only follow regulations and have things in place, but also, our focus is to also let there be accountability in situations like this, because without accountability, it's only, to me, a show. You're only putting on a show, right? But also accountability makes sure that they're going to be able to support their aquatic staff, saying, oh, if something happens, we're going to be in hot water. So let's make sure that our staff is prepared. Let's make sure that they have enough lifeguards. Let's make sure that we set rules into place to make our lifeguards and aquatic pool managers' life a little bit easier, right? It just kind of follows through that way.
I couldn't agree more. I think you hit the nail on the head exactly. Part of the labor shortage for lifeguards and aquatics is that point where, yes, it's a very fulfilling job. It's amazing. The friendships you make, the skills that you learn. But if you get paid the same minimum wage to assemble burritos or to watch 200 kids, you are going to have kids that are appropriately thinking about, I don't want this responsibility. I don't want this liability. And if they're not in an organization that has a framework, a water safety plan, like you said, that sticks to their guns, legislation or otherwise, regarding ratios. I mean, the number of times over my career where I was pressured by somebody above me, well, the ratios are just a guidance, right? The ratios are not the law, because here where I am in Alberta, the ratios are often not the law. They are the industry recommendation, and we'll try and explain, that the ratio is a general guidance. It depends on how many kids, how many ages, the actual skill level. We might have to bring the ratio down. We might be able to sometimes bring the ratio up. But I think, to your point exactly, legislatively, for some organizations, they need that line in the sand to say, oh, we'd actually be contravening a law if we do this. And it has to be that black and white sometimes, I think, because there's people who either they don't know the water safety piece, they have a dry background, they don't know the risks, or they don't care because they're unable to have other staff to support them, right? They're not able to bring in extra counselors, or they want to maximize their program registration. And unfortunately, it sounds like there was a lot of factors that contributed to your daughter's death that probably could have, any number of those or some of them, if they had been avoided, maybe it would have been a different result.
I agree. And, and for now, our biggest thing is to make sure that we began with a lot to make sure that this would not happen again in Texas. And we're hoping that um, we can duplicate this bill out in other states. And I know they're trying right now in Florida under Kareem's act. And it's really important. I think sometimes, we know water is fun, and it is. I mean, I love water. I grew up around, the ocean. I love and I respect water. I was always taught to respect water. But I think with the work that we're doing, I hope that one day we can try to change the culture. The bill, the law it's great. It puts barriers into for to protect the children. But at the end of the day, what we really hope is that this would happen. You bring in your child to a summer camp, then all of a sudden it's a priority now to ask whether your kid cannot or can't swim. So then, the camp is asking these questions, and the parents like, well, why are you making such a big deal about it? And then maybe the counselor can say, oh, well, did you know that drowning is the #1 killer of children? And you start building, this awareness. And I really hope that one day we can make it part of our culture just kind of like when you get into the car and you don't even think about it twice and you put on your seatbelt. I would love if that would happen when you go out to the lakes, to the rivers. If you just know that your kid cannot swim, you don't think about it twice. You put a jacket on them before entering the gates of the pool. It becomes part of the culture. And that's really we're trying to focus on. You know, Cati's Law is just our first step, but we are really focusing on you know, opening it up and try to see what else we can do, especially because of that great feedback that we're getting from the aquatic staff. And it's really saddening here in Texas how, you know, we're finding out it works, because a lot of this aquatic staff that we've met that do work through municipalities really care about water safety and try really hard to do their best. And then there's also municipalities that they don't really care. But at the end of the day, what really affects me and John is we're always about accountability, and knowing that here in Texas, a city doesn't have to do anything really. I mean, doesn't even have to have a lifeguard as far as we know. It's sad. It's really sad. I don't think there's any accountability, but our job right now is just to keep it positive and try to really arm up their aquatic staff to speak up, stand their ground, and if they see something that is going to put them or their pool patrons at risk, don't do it.
So I want to talk a little bit about the pushback that you had, because you mentioned that the bill wasn't adopted in the first session. And I'm thinking ahead to people in other jurisdictions who don't have this type of law in place. And I really hope, like what you're saying, Texas as a big state, as a taking that first big step, that it can be a trendsetter for the rest of the industry. I hope it really does showcase for other capitals and other regions that if Texas did this, it's actually very important, and we should look at doing this in our regions. What kinds of feedback did you hear, or concerns that people didn't want to pass a bill like this? Thinking other community centers or pool managers might hear the same types of things, and how can they prepare you know, rebuttals to the why we shouldn't do some sort of policy or standard like this at their organization?
So the biggest one that we got was, oh man, we're going to have to buy life jackets for our facilities. They're trying to see what it will cost the state. Zero. It costs the state zero to put this law into effect. And my response to mainly from facility owners was, what are you doing right now? And they say, oh, well, we require them to bring their jacket. Okay, that's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Or some would say, well, you know, the camps would say, well, we don't have life jackets. Same thing. What are you requiring right now? Well, we get them from the pool, from the city pool. Okay, we'll do that. Mm-hmm. It doesn't dictate who has to give the jacket. They have to have it on. So whether it be the parent bring them, the summer camp bring them, or the pool provide them, you figure it out, or you're going to have to get a jacket on that baby. Just like they've been available through these last years, same way. So that was one. And then of course, we ended up having, with our nonprofit, we have an application process they can go through, and we give them out free life jackets to summer camps and different organizations across Texas, absolutely free. So that's how we created that program. And then of course, I know in Texas there's also so many grants through Parks and Recreations program, things like that, where you can get funds to buy life jackets. But we wanted to make sure that there was nothing on the table, and so we clear that up. The second thing, they were worried that it would affect everybody, you know, like everybody. And I said, no, it has to be, I mean, it would be great, but this has to be organizations that are licensed by Health and Human Services. They're licensed to take care of kids. And then really those were the pushbacks. And unfortunately, you know, Texas, we are, you know, when there's a law that regulates the people, right, they will be pushback. It doesn't matter what it is. Which, you know, a lot of it I support, because, you know, we should have the freedom to do a lot of things. But my response to that was always, you know, if you step back, look who we are trying to protect, the most vulnerable, right? Children. These children, they don't have a voice like adults do. They don't know any better. They're little. So we are, as adults, should be there to protect them. So we really fought hard to, you know, show them that angle. and also to let them know, this right now there needs to be more research, but I would love to know, what the cost is to keep a child alive that has suffered a non-fatal drowning. As you know, a lot of them are left in vegetable states. And in Texas, we would always say for every one child that has died due to drowning, there's 8 that survived. And so if you look at what it would cost for all of the serious injuries that were caused due to drowning versus the cost of a life jacket, it's common sense. So that's what we used to kind of, explain to it. And it was always working when working positive and towards the same goal. We were very fortunate that we had great legislators with us. Representative Goodwin was our House representative. She used to be our district representative before we did redistricting, but she really fought for us. And in the Senate, we had 2 senators, Senator Cifarini, Democrat, and Senator Perry, Republican. So we had both sides working together for this. And at the end of the day, they just, push their R's and their D's down and focused on what is this for? Okay, yes, it's for children, it's for safety. And if you want to look at something else besides that, let's look at the numbers, and the numbers make sense.
Well, and I that's kind of what I wanted to get into a little bit, is I'm so glad to hear that it was bipartisan support, because the little bit of time I spent living in Texas, people are very opinionated about their rights, which is important. And I wasn't sure how that carried forward with water safety. It should be a no-brainer, you'd think, but exactly the arguments you said of, what are the cost of the life jacket, who's going to provide it. I think one of the reasons I like doing videos like this, or just talking with different professionals in aquatics and recreation, is some things seem so complicated sometimes, like such a big stumbling block. But when you zoom out from it, it's not that hard. Like you said, you have the parents buy the life jacket, or you add a fee onto the camp fee for a life jacket rental for that week, and the camp buys a bunch of life jackets, so they rent them out for $1 a day per kid to the parent. It's an add-on fee. Or the pool buys the life jackets, or like you said, grants in Canada here. Anytime somebody has said we don't have enough life jackets, I've said, call a business in your community that sells life jackets. Many would love to sponsor life jackets. That's such a feel-good opportunity. They can get them stitched, they can get them branded. People love good news donations. That's an easy win. That's been my experience. It's not that complicated to keep them in good condition if you hang them up, if you put them on a hook. If they're piled in a bucket and they stay wet, of course they're going to rot in one season. Getting some coat hangers, getting some hooks, hanging them up on nails. I mean, it doesn't take much. It's not that complicated. It's a pretty easy excuse, but it's not necessarily a valid excuse, right?
I can tell you that the minute, well, so we just came back from the National Drowning Prevention Conference in Reno, and then there, it's together with the Aquatic Association professionals. So we, got a lot of feedback, things like that. And I can tell you, I lost count of how many Texas municipalities approached us and said, oh, we know, we already stocked up with X number of life jackets, Kori, we're ready to go. And then us, kind of explaining, as okay, so now you have the right to stop a camp and say, who are your swimmers? Who are your non-swimmers? Okay. And if they should have permissions, they should have some form from the parent that says, if you want to go deeper, you can ask for it. They should have it on them. And so all of this, they're like, really? Like, yeah. And then of course, talking about ratios, that's another thing that we're working on right now. Unfortunately, many, because we're dealing to the pool side, right? That's not regulated by anybody. That's not regulated by Health and Human Services. They're not aware of what ratios the summer camps should be following. So we're trying to inform this other side now. So for instance, here in Texas, if you are an organization licensed by Health and Human Services and you are taking kids to the pool, the ratios are different. Right now, just off the top of my head, if you have 12 6-year-olds, right? you have to have one counselor per 12. It's very high here, still very high. But a lot of, and then of course it goes down, you know, to 2 counselors, the younger the children are, and 3 and so forth, and on 1 to 2. But so right now what we're working is to educate the staff at the door, because their ratios are way higher than that. And I said, no, 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 you have every right to say, I'm sorry, but you're not following your own ratios, which we in conjunction copy, so you can't come in.
Ratios, I mean, we could have a whole other conversation about ratios. It's so important. I think just speaking of the ratios that I've administered, we've tried at different organizations I've worked at to do, let's say it's maximum of 3 children under the age of 8 with 1 responsible adult in the water, or somebody who's 14 years of age or older. But even then, I mean, the definition of competent swimmer, the definition of a caregiver, are they fully in a bathing suit in the pool interacting with the kids? Are they standing, you know, shoulders back against the pool wall while the kids are on the other side of the pool? It's such a, it's so vague. And I think, like you said, working on training or standards within that is going to be really valuable, because the framework you've set in the law is so important. But then I do worry about administratively for those bad actors in the industry. So the parent fills out the form, they say my child can swim. What is that definition of can swim? And then how much is that child then? Oh, well, they don't need a life jacket. Or maybe the can swim is more specific, and some kids should still have a life jacket even if they can swim. Tell me a little bit about what the definition is of can swim in the law, or what you're working towards, or what you were thinking of when you guys wrote the law.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're working with right now is with, like I told you, when a law becomes onto effect on September 1st, then the agency picks it up, right? And then even though it's in effect, they started working with it to send it out to the public and try to see what else they can add, or things like that. And so one of the things that we are working on is the competency. So the form that they are working on right now, and remember, this is the state, so it takes a long process. Although I do have to say that we have been very, very fortunate that Health and Human Services has been amazing working with us. I mean, I could have, the whole team, leadership team has been on it. And which is the reason we were having these conversations. A lot of other states will tell me, you actually have conversations like this, like, yeah, we're
your
having
email.
yeah, like they know that this is a problem, and they're really trying hard to fix it, or to make the best out of it. So the form that we've suggested for them to use, and it's still in the works, is we went to the American Red Cross to find out what do they say that a competent swimmer is, right? And so there's a couple of points on there. One of them is, can they swim 25 yards without assistance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we got that information directly from the American Red Cross, which includes that. It includes, like, can they get in and out of a pool without assistance? I forgot. I can't think off the top of my head, but I'm sure you probably know them, Katie.
It'd be a disorienting entry, something like that.
Yeah. So those points to put on the form, that is the permission slip that the parents will be filling out.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are hoping, because what's happening now, we've shared this with summer camps as we've been in the process, and they say, Kori, this is great, because a lot of the parents, when they look at the slip, they say, oh God, no, 25 yards? My kid could not do that. Okay, then they are considered a non-swimmer. And that helps us classify them, because yes, it's true. A lot of parents overcompensate and say, oh yeah, they can swim, when in reality, they're not good swimmers. And so that's what we're working on right now with the state. We really hope that our suggestions are taken, and that by this coming August is when it should be complete, that it's out there to every single organization that's licensed. But for now, we're letting them know as we do these trainings, hey, this is our suggestion. You should ask the parents. And honestly, I would probably say the feedback we're getting is that maybe 80% of the parents are going, oh no, they can't swim 25 yards. Mm-hmm. And then, so they're considered non-swimmers.
Well, and that's not the parents' fault. I mean, it's the same. A lot of parents can't necessarily assess their kids' ability, let's say, to skate and play ice hockey. They see their kid practice, but they don't know how many laps they're doing. They don't know the distance. And so when it came to teaching swimming lessons for many, many years, parents would often equate their swimming level with their grade level or something to their age, or they know they swam for 30 minutes, but they didn't realize that they didn't swim the whole width of the pool or the whole length of the pool. And so I think that's really valuable. Whatever they come up with, I mean, an organization can set a higher bar internally. One would hope that organizations really look at, you know, because you can even get really granular when I've dealt with parents. Unfortunately, in the current day and age, parents might lie about their kid's birthday or their kid's ability because they need the childcare. They need them to be in camp. They might think, well, if my child is a non-swimmer, it's not that they have to wear a life jacket. Maybe they won't take them in this camp and I don't have another childcare option. So there's going to be other factors that bigger organizations are going to have to consider in their intake process.
And the other thing that we are finding out, we heard this from a lot of states, Oregon, some here in Houston, which I thought this is something that we are working on for the future. I just thought it was the greatest idea. A lot of these municipalities were telling me summer camps have been a big issue with them for the same reasons that you said, right? They sit back on the phones or bleachers, whatever. They said, so we actually turned it around and just said, if you want to come to our pools in the summer, you must have your staff come and take the training that we provide to our staff. And so I thought, what? And they said, oh yeah, Kori. They said, there's only a certain number that come all the time because we have to register them, make sure they're approved. But we just stopped. We just said, you need to do it. And so, and she said, and what happens when we bring them in so they can train with our staff, they have what they call oh shit moments. They're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that drowning can happen this quick. I didn't realize that, all of these things. And so they're prepared and they take it back to their staff. And when they come to our camps, they're on it. They know where to be, what areas, things like that. And I just thought, that's the best thing I've ever heard. You can do that. And then a lot of these municipalities that do have great leadership, they said, yeah, we can do whatever we want because it's our pool. We want to make sure that everybody's safe. And so if they do not come to the training, guess what? They don't come in summer to our pools. And I thought, oh, I love that.
Well, especially in geographic regions where the municipality owns all of the pools, it's an easy way to exclude those groups that don't want to comply. And it's really not that hard. I mean, the first organization I was lifeguard for from 2005 to 2008, I mentioned some of these camp swims that in hindsight, I go, oh my God, what were we doing? When I went back to work there again in 2011, they had reached a point like what you're describing, where at the beginning of the season, part of the counselor training was a 90-minute session with the aquatic staff talking about what the ratios are, lifeguard signals, our expectation when you bring kids to the pool that you participate, you wear a bathing suit. If you, for some reason, can't get into the pool, if you have a cast, we need to know, or your kids need to be wristbanded or labeled, because that's the other piece with a lot of these big groups is if you bring 40 kids to the pool and they're supervised by leaders, Jana, Susie, and Will, how do we know which kids belong with which counselors or which guardians? They're all swimming around if they're not participating as fully as supervision people in the pool. And just being able to create that personal connection with the camp counselors earlier on in the season through that simple training really said, hey, like we aquatic staff, we're watching you too. You're accountable to us. And if necessary, aquatic management will speak to camp management about counselors who are not in the pool with their kids or counselors who are not enforcing pool rules like showering and running on the deck. Like it is a collaboration to keep the kids safe. We're not trying to create red tape because we have nothing better to do. It is ultimately for the safety of these kids.
Yeah. And I keep on telling staff, it's not until you have a drowning happen under your watch, then you'll really see how serious this is. And, I always think if one of those if that pool manager would have spoken up and not admitted the camp as she should have, and stood her ground, as they would have had enough lifeguards, uh my little girl would have been there. She would have, even if I think about all these things. It's just, it was just so simple to put a jacket on her. That's
Mhm.
how simple it is, and she would have still been here today. But unfortunately, now our job is to make sure that this doesn't happen to another child in our state, and hopefully we work towards the nation, because got these drowning is very common. Drownings in summer camps and a lot of negligence in summer camps is unfortunately very common.
Mhm.
And we wanted to make sure that there was a change, that there is accountability, and we're just going to keep doing our work. And the biggest thing is training the summer camps. We have already instructed them, and give them more like giving them advice. And a lot of the things that come up is, we tell them, did you know that you should have staff that can swim, that's going to go to the pool? And a lot of times they don't have staff that can swim. They just send them out there. And so we've, education, and tell them, hey, you should go to the pool you're going to be going to, meet with the aquatics manager, pool manager, ask for their emergency action plan. Mimic it as well, show it to your staff, tell them where they should be, where counselor ABC is going to be, who's going to be in charge of what. Do a diagram. I always tell people, how you have a fire drill or fire drill folder. I said you should have one like that for the pool, with the map of the pool, parents' phone numbers, emergency contacts, who's going to be on watch where at what time. They should be wearing their water watcher badges. We go through so much detail, and a lot of the times they say, Kori, of course, the big question is, why isn't this offered to us by the state? And I said, we're really working on it. We're working on it.
Such a big problem. And I mean, I think the progress you've made already in a short period of time is already incredible, because having worked municipally and seeing legislation pass just at a municipal level, I know the time and the feedback process that's built in, right? Part of democracy, that feedback process draws things out really a long time. I'm part of an ISO committee, an International Standards Organization committee, that's been working on a standard for 10 years. I've only been on the committee for 3 years, and it's very, very slow work. But it's exactly what you said. I mean, when I went back to that organization in 2011, we also started asking the camp counselors to do a swim test, because it had never occurred to people to actually check that they could swim. And it's not a point of shame. It's not that they would be fired. It would just be saying, look, the people who cannot swim will have other duties during the swim time. And maybe the camp coordinators, or maybe some other, from the computer camp, maybe some of those counselors are going to float over and participate in the swims, because they didn't realize, like, it's that bias that comfortable or competent swimmers have, that everyone can swim. And that's just not the case culturally, or where people grow up, their background around water. I remember the first time I was doing an interview, and I asked at the end of the interview of the candidate who was applying for a customer service job at my pool, I said, do you know how to swim? And the HR person turned and looked to me, because this wasn't planned. And I said, I just want to know, if you're going to walk out onto the pool deck to give somebody a message, and if you accidentally fall into the pool, we would like to know that we should plan to rescue you. Like, we're not, it's no judgment. And in fact, that individual had grown up in Zimbabwe with no access to pools, and said, no, I'm terrified of water. And so it was a really good opportunity to have a healthy discussion about her comfort level being in the pool area. And she was willing to do that. But the HR person had said, like, it wouldn't occur to me to ask if they can swim. And
Yeah.
that's such a basic premise of everything we do.
Yeah. It's shocking, that sometimes, you that I guess it's shocking to me, but at the same time, when I knew that, feedback from directors would be unknown, yeah, I have no idea if they could swim or not, or they can't swim. It's not, now it's not shocking. It was in the beginning, but it's not shocking now because I realize that they just don't know better. There's the agency that is training them to watch for a kid um, had that missing gap of water safety, right? I mean, they do a great job training them for all other stuff. In fact, even when COVID came around, it was like this and that. But my question was like, guys, you've missed it. You've missed water safety, and you're letting them take them to the pool. And and they've been, and this is really one of those things that they just missed. And unfortunately, it took the death of my daughter and my husband and I to walk into legislation and make people aware of this and try to, and got these law passed.
One of the things I don't remember who told me this story a number of years ago. It was a smaller community center and somebody had the genius idea. Their upper management, their rec director or their somebody above them didn't understand how busy the pool is when it's, loud, there's hundreds of kids. It's a safe environment, but just that hot, humid, loud environment. Maybe there's music playing, there's balls being thrown around. And she had said to her director, well, could you just come down for 10 minutes and hold a clipboard as we're doing attendance or something very menial to help out? And she said, he came down in his nice pressed slacks and his polo and the floor is soaking wet and he's got his loafers on. And at the end of it was like 15 minutes. She said he looked like just this, he was so impactful without even saying anything, just being in that environment instead of in his office at his desk. She said, everything thereafter I wanted, it was much less of a fight because he had seen the environment that we were dealing with for 15 minutes. Never mind a public swim in July, from 12 to 5. It's a hot day, right? There's families there with picnics and there's dogs and other things. Like just you can imagine how, but we live in that environment as lifeguards or parents and they don't.
Yeah, and that's really, John and I are really working. We're working right now with the the aquatic world to support them. And when we found out that specifically here, the city of Cedar Park, they didn't have to be set accountable for everything according to what we know. That really was devastating for us, and we're trying to change it with the Texas Supreme Court as we speak now. Because we really do feel that at the end of the day, it's like it's unfortunate that she had to do that, like bring them down so they can see. And that was only 15 minutes. Imagine if he did 2 days, right? And so I don't think they're aware of how stressful the jobs are for their staff and the situations that they're putting them in, because at the end of the day, like you mentioned earlier, they're worried about the summer camps that come in, the money, right? The funds that come in. But no amount of funds is worth losing a child, and they won't know until they lose their own child or their children have a non-fatal drowning where they're severely medically injured. I think that's when they kind of wake up. So I really think the idea you mentioned about her bringing down her boss, I'm going to share that with others because we do get a lot of feedback like that. And I'm going to make that suggestion. Hey, bring your boss down and let them watch and see what your job entails and how stressful it is. And when they ask themselves, why can't we find lifeguards? Maybe they have a light bulb up in their head and realize that, no, this should be taken serious and, and do a better job.
And I don't think she framed it to him as, let me show you what I live with each day. I think it was sort of one of those very lazy, oh, no, your team has it handled. Just let me know how I can help. And she said something spontaneous like, well, if you could just come down and do attendance as we do the swim test, that would be really helpful. And then you can go back to your office. I remember so distinctly that, yeah, because it would make sense. You've got the kids raring to go. It's loud, it's wet, it's splashing. And then you add in, like you said, the Texas heat, the sun, dehydration, right? It's
Well, not only that, Katie, but if you realize behaviors are a big issue right now.
For sure.
Behaviors. And then you also add on that children that are on the spectrum that might look traditionally developed to your eye. And so you add all of that, and then you're expected to be on, all three of you with 250 kids at the pool. Or, you know, it's humanly impossible.
Well, and it's hard because I know, having had many conversations with parents over the years, it's their right not to disclose medical conditions. I've had parents say, you know, I don't want you stigmatizing my child because they're on the spectrum. But often I would say broadly to any parent, like, you're not required to disclose any concerns or any information that you don't feel like you want to disclose. But I do want to let you know that autistic children are, you know, 4 times more likely to drown because they have a fascination with water. And I don't know if that's been discussed in your, you know, with your pediatrician or your treatment sessions. It's, quote, obvious to those of us who work in the aquatic field. We know these stats, but not everybody knows these stats. One of the light bulb moments for me in my career recently was a couple of years ago. I've been married about 12, 13 years. My husband is not a pool person at all. And one day he came to me over lunch and was saying, did you know that children under the age of 8 are significantly more at risk of drowning? And it was just one of these things where this is so obvious to me, and yet it had taken however many years that I've been doing this for it to reach him, not because he doesn't care, but it's just not in the regular things that you learn day to day. So we're still kind of preaching to the masses, but it's not always landing the way we think it is.
And honestly, that's why we went to legislation, because there has already been research that came out and has come out on you know, the National Water Safety Plan. Legislation is what makes change, you know, and that's, I keep on telling people, I mean, it's great the work that we stepped into the nonprofit world, and we started looking and meeting other families that have had children die due to drowning. A lot of work with like blood and sweat is being done. And I saw that, and I saw, why isn't there change? Well, because people need to be told what to do. And if not, there should be a consequence. How is that? Well, through lawmaking legislation. And that's why I decided to go in. Not many people go through legislation. It's very difficult. You have to have the right mindset, because at the end of the day, it's politics, and it could be very, very harsh. But we were very blessed that we had amazing people, staff, and legislators that supported us, and we fought. And it was a fight. But we knew that that was the way to go, even though it was going to be the hardest. We knew that that was the way to go, and I would do it again a million times. And I guess if God wants me to do it again for another law, we will. So, but right now we're just trying to close off the HB 59, got this law to end in August. I guess all the steps that go before it.
So why don't we start to wrap up, Kori? Tell us where people can find out more information about your organization and what else you have planned, or where people can reach you if they're interested in learning more or trying to develop something like this in their province or state, or even just a standard at their facility or organization.
Yeah, so livelikecati.org. It's livelikecati.org. Just go on there. There's all my information is on there. My email is super simple. It's Kori@livelikecati.org. And if you are in Texas, it doesn't matter if you're a summer camp, organization, any kind of organization, or you have a public pool, your HOA pool, whatever it is, and you need life jackets, just apply through our summer life jacket program through our website. And right now we just opened up the program, so usually we try to end it and get all the life jackets out by the beginning of June, because that's when summer camps are open and ready to go. So I encourage, for right now we are only able to reach Texas, but as we get bigger, we're going to be able to reach other states. And in reference to training, ColinsHope.org. It's our partners, and they have all of the videos that we've done on there for webinar trainings. If you want a specific training for your staff, you can also reach out through our website, and we can do that as well. It's really important. I really think that every single public pool should have some type of emergency action plan. You'll be surprised how many pools do not. And so I encourage, if you're watching and you have a public pool, get that emergency action plan ready and make sure that you share that with any summer camp or organization bringing in children. So, and the next things that we're doing right now is really focusing on reaching the aquatic personnel. We have things in place for summer camps and training, but we are really reaching the aquatics in reference to sharing our story with them and seeing how we can help them and making sure that they are aware of this law. If you are in Texas and you are in a public pool and you are receiving summer camps as of last year in September, you have every right to stop every summer camp that's coming in, ask for permission slips on who can and who cannot swim. If you don't want to have the permission slip, just ask who can and who cannot swim. They should already be identified and tell you these 10 cannot swim. A lot of camps are using bracelets, different things that'll say, just make it easier for you. Those babies have to be in a life jacket, either provided by you or the camp, before they enter the gates of the pool. If they come to you having no clue who can and cannot swim, you have every right to turn them back. And that is because you have got this law on your side in Texas. Also, you know, the other thing I wanted to share is parents like me that share our story. We're here to help, right? A lot of times aquatic professionals, I've seen this before, Katie, where they shy away from speaking to parents who've lost children to drowning. But my whole thing is, you know, I'm here to help. There's nothing that you can say that's going to hurt me more than the loss of my child. So I promise you that it's going to be okay. Just reach out. Share our story as much as we can help you. That's we're working on a lot of things right now, but I think that's really my focus right now, if reaching out to the aquatic professionals.
No, I think that everything you're doing is amazing. And the progress, as I said, that you've made in just a few short years has been really astounding, because it's such an area in our industry that there are gaps. I live in Canada, but I speak with a lot of aquatic professionals in the US. And as I mentioned to you before we started recording, you know, the famous Yoni Gottesman video, other camp stories of drownings, fatal, non-fatal. As you said, at least in Canada, we estimate for every fatal drowning, there's 4 to 5 undocumented non-fatal drownings. We're not sure how many of those have morbidity. And so it really is probably a lot worse than people realize, but we're not connecting the dots the same way. An in-hospital fatality from complications is not necessarily tracked as a drowning fatality. Or the way in which, if somebody came in as a camp kid to the ER, would it be connected back to they came from the pool or they came from the lake? I don't know, right? Statistics are not always able to track those things. So
we have that issue here too, unfortunately. You can't. I know the CDC is trying to do a better job on getting more data, but you're right. I think the numbers are higher. In Texas last year, we had 87 children drown. And God knows how many, you know, non-fatals, and like you said, how many survived and passed away later. There's a lot of things you're not able to track. So,
and I think also when it comes to media coverage, I think it's my interpretation that some media organizations don't necessarily want to put these bad news stories out there. Like, nobody is going to be happy reading about a drowning child. Last year, I was working with an influencer. A few years ago, I was working with an influencer on her dream home, and that included a pool. And first part of the session we did, the consult, was regarding the risk of drowning, non-fatal. I showed light for Levi. I showed some photos. He's a child with a lot of complications from a non-fatal drowning. They were horrified. They put in 2 fences on their pool, and her nephew just drowned last year at a non-fatal, taken off life support in hospital from complications at his birthday party. I don't know the details. It wasn't at her home. It was at a different pool. But, you think you've reached one family, but you haven't reached everyone, right? It's a continuing process, unfortunately.
It is. And yeah. And unfortunately, we have, we constantly have, friends and families that you have to remind, and I don't know how to, you just try your best. And
Absolutely.
and that's really it. But I really think that, again, you can tell a human till you're blue and pass out. But when they know that there's consequences and accountability for something, and like a law, it's little different, which is why you put your seatbelt on when you get in your car.
Absolutely. And I should finish my thought, because I didn't get to the end.
Oh,
I
sorry.
No, it wasn't you, it was me. Anyway, I knew this child of this influencer had a submersion event, and I Googled all of the media outlets in their city, in your state, and it was very hard to find any public reports because it occurred at a residential pool. The only thing I could find was, reports of ambulance called to this block of this street in this city. But I knew that this had happened and I couldn't find it anywhere. And I don't think it was hidden on purpose. I just think, it doesn't reach the general media. And so if that was a huge indication to me that if we don't know about the drowning, it's not being tracked, because there's not necessarily a mechanism. If the EMS doesn't track it within the city or the state, and then the child is taken off of life support in the hospital, there's just no way to track it.
Yeah, there's not. And the way I find out a lot about summer camp drownings and different drownings is when I meet parents. And, I ran into so many parents that are like, oh, I never heard about your child. And, oh, when my child was 2, drowned under the care of a daycare. And I thought, why didn't I see anything in the news? And it's just so, yeah. So my story and my husband's story, our family story about Cati, we don't hide anything. We want to make sure everybody knows everything. But at that same side, we want to make sure that the work that we're doing is an honor for our daughter. But it's good work that is making change. And then we know that it's already happening with legislation and with training, summer camps. But now our focus is heading over to the aquatic professionals and making sure that not only are they protected from having to live through a traumatic experience like this, but they are empowered to speak up and, and not allow the leadership to put them and their jobs at risk. That's really what we're going to be focusing in.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This is Kori Delapeña from Live Like Cati, which is an organization based in Texas. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Katie.